Anyway, well, good morning, oh, good morning. We are gonna begin this is my last session with you guys. So we had the on-site, and so what I'm planning to do is to give you an overview of what I'll be covering with the local staff, as well as work you through some of the examples. So as we were discussing in the last session, the whole concept of understanding change and how people change is really vital to implementing motivational interviewing. So, change in motivational interviewing is the essence of the whole concept. So last time we talked about the philosophy, and we talked about like some of the spirit of motivational interviewing, as well as talked about change. But what I want to shift us to this for this session and examine are the skills that are fundamental to implementing motivational interviewing. So you're going to be getting the abbreviated version today. And just as we progress through today, just know that the local staff, the LWIAs, will get much more detail and much more description of each of these skills. So there are basically five foundational skills that are critical to motivational interviewing, and those are asking open-ended questions, uh, giving affirmations, asking permission, using reflective listening, and then making summarizing statements, or summarizing the content and the agreement that you've reached up to the point of by the end of the interview or by the end of the session. So we're going to cover, again, each one of those briefly today. My guess is that as state staff, you naturally employ some set of these skills when working with local staff, to train them, to monitor them, to just in your routine interactions, or if they ask you for ideas, or ask you for advice. So what we'd love to see in shifting to a more customer-driven system is we would love to see career coaches using these skills with more regularity. And the first skill is asking open-ended questions. And my experience in going around the country and training people, it seems like such an easy concept, but it is a lot more complex or difficult than it seems on its face. So let's take a look at that. So what we want to do, backing up to the last session and trying to pull this all together, is that what we want to do is one of our goals is to encourage and to reinforce what's known as change talk. And what we want to do, and I think I talked about it the last time, is, one of our goals is to evoke it. And as we evoke it, we want to increase its frequency. And we want to increase its frequency because the more a person talks about making a change, doing a change, implementing something that's a change, the greater the likelihood they are to do it. So one way of doing that is by asking the right kinds of questions. So what we want to do is we want to ask questions that help people to see themselves changing. Questions that help them to articulate the benefits of making a change, or questions that help them see the difficulty in their current situation. So if you recall from comfort zones, the difficulty of being in status quo, because what we want to do is move them to this learning zone. And so, we want to ask questions that get them to express a desire to make a change. So we're trying to move them out of that comfort zone and into the training zone. And the type of questions that evoke change talk are open-ended questions. Closed questions don't evoke it. And I'll show you examples. I think that it's open questions elicit more extended answers, so it's going to take a little longer because you're giving the speaker, I guess, like just more room to tell their story or to reflect on the benefits, to reflect on their ambivalence about making a change. It allows participants to express their knowledge of a situation, their opinions, their feelings. And so it's giving them more control. And open questions lead to change talk, which is what we want to do, is we want to get people to talk themselves into changing. And so it also allows them to explore their options and generate options and, think through how to solve a problem. And I think that, it's really important because closed questions don't evoke change talk, but oftentimes I see it as problematic. And I don't know if you see this when you're traveling around and interacting with locals, but it's problematic if the initial assessment or the initial meeting that a participant, or at that point is an applicant, I guess, with their career coach, case manager, staff member from the program begins with asking a series of closed questions. And that's, oftentimes what I see is that these initial sessions begin with like filling out forms. And I think that sets it sets a climate, it sets the stage for the participant not being open, not being trusting, not giving us the information that we necessarily need. So let me show you some examples of open questions. And they're not in any particular order, and they cover disparate topics. Some relate to participants, and some I wrote were specifically something that I could hear in my own mind you may be saying to an LWIA. So like, what steps, if any, have you taken to figure out what you want to do? That would be, well, I'm saying it could be its participant, but if you were talking about moving to a customer-driven system, that's a question you could also ask a local staff person. If you could do things all over again, would you choose the same path for yourself? What would you change? Again, I was thinking of that as a participant question. What advice would you share about managing money and avoiding debt with your younger self? One of the things that came up at the live session, as well as in the last webinar session, is there are local staff who say that they wish that participants would focus more on like financial health and budgeting and not getting themselves into debt, because I think that sometimes it closes off a lot of options that could be otherwise available for them. And then these last three, I thought more of state talking to locals. In your view, what systems and processes help participants build and maintain their motivation, like within your system? Or what ideas do you have for moving forward toward a more customer-driven system? And what local, state, or national policies get in the way of moving toward being more customer focused and letting them have the floor? Just notice that open-ended questions cannot be answered with yes or no or a simple phrase. Like if you ask it, well, it's not always yes or no, because it could be, what state do you live in? It's still a closed question. I would say Maryland. I mean, it just requires a 1 or 2 word answer or a simple phrase. So what I want you to notice about these types of questions is how they actively involve the participant or whoever it is that you're having a conversation with. And what open-ended questions do is you can use them to get a person to start thinking about and talking about making change, because it gives them the freedom to talk, to tell their story, create forward momentum. But best of all, and most of all, I think it builds relationships. So, because what we're saying is, I'm fully interested in your point of view, and I want to know your feelings about whatever the topic is. So the idea is to get change that the other person should be doing most of the talking. I mean, if I'm conversing with a friend or a family member or whatever, and that person tells me why I should restart my exercise program, I'm less likely to start it than when I do the talking and I talk about why it is that I should restart. So, because in the end, I have to convince myself. So Open-ended questions are good for that. Now I'm going to show you some closed questions. These are the opposite. And they're opposite because they can be responded to with a brief word or just a concise or, factual response. Example, like, do you live in Illinois? Or where have you applied for jobs? And the person can say, Amazon distribution center. I applied at Office Depot. I applied at Sam's Club. Or how many children do you have? Again, all just short answers. Typically, closed questions serve to just gather information. They don't, their purpose is not to foster relationships. But I want to note that oftentimes conversations are curtailed by using closed questions because people tend to answer exactly what is asked. And they try to help the questioner, in a sense, by not elaborating, so that you end up with this like dead space. There's pregnant pause in between questions as the person just waits for the next question. So closed questions can also guide the conversation in a direction that is determined by the questioner. It's not always a bad thing, but the questioner is totally controlling the direction. And like an example would be if I said as a career coach, or I said to a participant, have you ever considered returning to school? And the participant says, yeah, I've thought about it. And then, but the participant is actually thinking to themselves as saying, well, I've thought about it. And they don't articulate this, but maybe they're saying, but I can't, I already have like an outstanding student loan. And so I know I couldn't get the financing. And it's all just stuff that comes into their mind in a split second. But the case manager then asks, well, what would you like to study? And so this, I just want you to see, changes the course in a sense of the conversation because it directs away from where the participant might have taken the conversation, which is about student loans and their indebtedness and therefore their lack of ability to go back to school. So a better question might have been, well, what are your thoughts about going back to school for training? Or what might be some pros and cons of going back to training? And then the participant is much more likely to reveal the direction their brain was going, which is about the loan. So closed questions are sometimes necessary, but they don't elicit change talk. And so, we want to, sometimes we have to use them, but you want to, I don't know. I don't know if there's a rule of thumb, but for me, like every 5 questions that I ask, I want 4 of them, 3 at a minimum, to be open-ended. And, maybe I have to ask for some quick information. So let me give you a couple examples and we're going to do a little activity. So here are a few. These are closed. Did you graduate from high school? Are you willing to join job club, the job club meeting? Have you applied to any kind of training or schooling? Or down, if I was going down and I was talking like as though I'm state staff talking to an LWIA, what instrument do you use for basic assessment? Or how many participants do you currently have on your caseload? What's the frequency that you do follow-up calls? And I heard this at the live training, is does a case manager conduct follow-up calls, or is that handled by somebody else? So those are all closed, and they're not the kinds of questions that get people to contemplate or talk about change. They're data gathering, information gathering questions. So they tend to shut down conversation because people are just answer the question to move on. And in a sense, it kind of trains people not to reveal. It feels a little bit like an interrogation. So let me show you a side-by-side example. Well, I did 3 examples, and I think the illustration kind of, for me at least, it illustrates the concept. So they're all parallel. What's the highest grade that you completed? Which I could say 12th, or for me, a master's degree. based or compared to parallel, talk to me about your schooling and education from high school on. And so now you're going to get the story much more open-ended. Did you enjoy the workshop versus what did you think of the workshop? Where have you worked before? And then they can just name McDonald's, Dairy Delight, I'm using my own, Country Club. Uh, and then versus, please tell me a little bit about your work history. I'm interested in knowing what you did, how long you worked, wherever you worked, and what made you leave that particular job. So you can compare the left side to the right and using chat or unmute, and it's a pretty simple question, but what are the advantages of the questions on the right as opposed to the questions on the left? The material that's covered is identical in a sense, but the answers are really likely to differ. So what's preferable about right to left or left to right?
Hi, Jody. This is Jim.
Hey, Jim.
Um, I think just as known, it makes it more conversational and gets the person talking. But a comment I did want to make about the open question, and I just wanted to get your feedback. It seems like it's often could be used for the closed questions to reaffirm something that you don't know that you think the person said. So you would recite back to get affirmation that you got it correct. But then another one, I reflect back to what you talked about in a previous session about the Weight Watchers, how the person who was your career planner or case manager for Weight Watchers used those closed questions back to you, use your own information about how you wanted to have the weight down for the Weight Watcher for your reunion. So they use those closed questions just to get your brain thinking like, oh yeah, I did say that.
Yeah, and that's where I'm thinking that, and I agree. The first thing that you said, Jim, which is totally true, and we're going to go into that because it's another skill, is and it's when you're using like reflective listening, and you say, so like I just want to make sure that I heard you right. You're saying that, and then I repeat it back so I can ask that in a closed question, right? Or did I get that right? Which is more it's sort of combining, I guess, these closed questions with reflective listening. And but the other thing is that like with and I agree with Jenny did, or what Marilyn did, who worked for Jenny Craig, would say something like, oh, did they cancel your high school reunion? Which like does make me reflect back. But it's the idea that the and I guess that's everything's like a continuum. Like the closed questions aren't entirely bad. It's I think the issue for me and the emphasis is that we still need to have more open than closed. And then if somebody would say something that I'm not sure of, I can clarify with a closed question. But the on balance should be the more open-ended questions. And my experience in sitting listening to case managers, career coaches, where like I'm tracking them through the program as the way in which a participant would, is it's a series of closed questions. And it's almost like they're asked in such a way that doesn't give people the freedom to tell their story or to reveal what their thoughts are on a subject, if that makes sense. So I think that it just, I guess what I'm trying to say, it looks easy, or it seems like it would be easy, but it's not an easy, evidently it's not an easy skill at all to develop. Does that make sense, Jim?
Oh,
How I,
yes, yes.
okay.
It was more, my thought on that was
Yeah.
not necessarily for this slide. It was for a previous slide of cases where you'd use closed. I mean, I'm a full agreement that we need to use open to find out the details about the person, but the closed are good just to affirm that you understand. Because I think a lot of times we do misunderstand people and we need to make sure we're getting that. And then also using that information we get from them later on. And that's a really important reason to ask these open, to get that information so we know about the client, what makes him or her tick. So
Yeah, and I
definitely.
think that exactly the information that you get with open is much richer. I mean, because if you just say, what's the highest grade you completed? And I say 12th or ninth or master's, you're really not getting that much. You're just getting some factual information. But when you say, talk to me about your schooling, your education from, high school on, and I just, for me, I just sort of tell you the story. It's much richer. It's a much fuller picture. And I also think that what happens, and you'll remember the slide from the last time that we were talking where I said, sometimes I had a picture of a woman. It's like you learn what you believe when you hear yourself think, or when you hear yourself talk. It's that as I talk about something, what we're really trying to do is ask questions that get people to talk about, to some degree, making change. I mean, because that's part of what we're trying to do is evoke change talk. So you get them onto a subject, get them talking about it so that they say things like, I left school in the ninth grade, but sometimes I think about that and I think it was a mistake. Now my older self tells me I should have gone ahead and graduated because, it's kind of hurt me and my job prospects, and everything I just said, in a sense, is change talk. And so by asking these open-ended questions, you get change talk where you don't with the closed. So what I want us to do, and we're going to do this together, and we'll see how we're moving. So here are 4 close questions. Do you have the financial resources to support yourself and your family during training? Second, do you have any barriers that need to be resolved before you can go to work or go to school? And you guys all remember, I hate the word barriers, but I thought I'd put it in there because it's oftentimes asked. And then this would be more from you guys to a local. Do exited participants generally respond to follow-up calls? Or how much time per week would you estimate you spend trying to re-engage participants who are no longer actively participating in services? All 4 of those are closed questions. And I think that you can see that these closed questions sound like data gathering. They're transactional type questions. And then on the right, I put a cheat sheet. These are like they're just open-ended question starters. What have you found? Tell me why. Hey, when you think about, your past work history, then go on with the question. Can you say more about that? You said this. Can you tell me what you mean by that? Uh, what would you like to know about, XYZ, going back to school, the labor market in our area, whatever that is. So what I want us to do, and we'll do this by chat or you can unmute, is that I want to give you an opportunity to take whatever I have on the right and turn it into an open-ended question. So do you have the financial resources to support yourself and your family during the training? How can I turn that into an open-ended question? This is the part where you unmute and you say something or you pull up chat. I'm
I
seeing
think leading
chat.
with a how question, right, would be a opening to allow him or her to talk about it. So a lot of it's the same information, just rewording with hows instead of do, right?
Um, I'm just seeing the chat. How would you respond to a person resistant to a particular open-ended question? Maybe the reply, I'm sorry, I've gone off track here, is something that they don't know. If the thing about that Ramon is asking is when people have been trained over and over and over to be confronted just with these closed questions, it does take retraining to get people to respond to open-ended questions sometimes. And so a person can, and it's entirely possible to take an open question and turn it into a closed question. So if I say something like, can you tell me about your educational experience, from high school on to now, they can say, yeah, I graduated from high school, and that's the last time I went to school, which they've kind of turned their answer into a closed question. It is through almost repeated training that and repeated questions and giving them space. You're trying to build trust that you get them to be feel more safe in the environment, telling you more about what's going on with them. But agencies, and I don't care what agency you're talking about, Voc Rehab, TANF, community actions, work with them all, ask so many close questions that people are just accustomed to it. And so we have to retrain our participants as we retrain ourselves, and be ready that some people are going to take closed questions, or open questions, turn them into closed. Some people take a closed question and turn it into open. That makes things a little bit easy. Let's see, using the right question. You gain more knowledge, you gain an understanding. Yep, all of those things. Here's one, Chelsea. How do you plan to manage the financial resources needed to support yourself and your family during training? That is open. Yes, tell me about how you plan to pay the bills while attending training. Excellent, open. Tell me the story. Tell me about your financial responsibilities at home. How would your participation in training affect your ability to support you and your family? Excellent. And during training, how are you going to be able to keep up with your financial responsibilities? Excellent. You guys are right on track. And so let me show you mine. I just said, talk to me about how you would support yourself and your family if you went to training. So again, you're making them one of the complaints a lot of local staff will have is how people come to us and want us to solve their problems. And we oftentimes do. Like, we give them, here's my advice, here's what you should do, etc. And what we want to do, if we're going to empower people, is present it to them and let them solve it. I mean, I'm there as a support, but I shouldn't be solving other people's problems, because as we talked about, I don't live their lives, so I don't know everything. It really, you're directing the conversation through asking them the right questions. Here's another one. Second one, do you have any barriers that need to be resolved before you can go to work or school? How can you ask that as an open-ended question? I think that one's a little harder. I'm going to guess you're still typing. I have one. Talk to me about anything that would prevent you from going to work or school. Excellent, Shannon. Excellent. Elizabeth, what obstacles or circumstances are preventing you from going to work or school? Talk to me about some of the challenges, Brian says, that you face that might impact returning to work or going to school. Excellent. And actually, I like this version of question anyway, rather than like saying, are you a felon, or do you have the way in which we ask some of those barrier questions. I'll show you my version in the interest of time. When you think about going to school or returning to work, what other things in your life, legal, medical, caring for a loved one, housing, would need to be planned around? And I should not have the word them in there. What else is going on? And I just give them the legal, medical, caring for a loved one, housing, to like give them clues as to what I might be thinking about. And I think that would be a good question in like an initial assessment or initial getting to know you. Okay, here's one for local or for state to local. Do exited participants generally respond to follow-up calls? Something you could ask them in an interview. Oh, and I like Christopher, what things do you need to do first in order to move forward? If you were going to score work tomorrow, what's the first thing you can think of that might concern you? All of these are excellent. Now, do exited participants generally respond to follow-up calls? Again, guessing you're typing, or you could just unmute. How do exited participants generally respond to follow-up calls? Excellent. Chelsea, right on. Anybody else? Describe the process that happens with follow-up calls in terms of responses and no responses by exited participant. And all that says, I want to hear your story. I want to hear your opinion. And, want to hear your, thoughts and feelings on the subject. And so you're more likely to build trust, build relationship. Here's my version. What do you think works and doesn't work when trying to follow up with exited participants? And so again, take the floor. And Brian, what's been LWIA's experience when reaching out to exited participants for follow-up? Excellent. And last one, how much time per week would you estimate you spend trying to re-engage participants who are no longer actively participating in the service? And I could say as a staff person, 2 hours or 10 hours. So closed. How do I turn that into open? You're typing. I'm not seeing anything. Okay, describe the process and time it takes to re-engage participants who are no longer active. Excellent. Um, uh, Shannon. So here's mine. Talk about your strategies for re-engaging participants who are no longer actively participating in services. And so it's just this, have a conscious awareness that when you ask an open question, you're much more likely to get a fuller description. The person can take it wherever they think is important to take the conversation. And it says that, like, I'm open to hearing, and you're allowing people to actually kind of problem solve and hear themselves talk, so that because they know what they believe, and as they hear themselves talk, what we're trying to do is open them up for a change talk. So I'm going to show you one other or another aspect of this, and I'll move through this quickly. But so here's the situation. Let's say that there's an adult participant who doesn't have a high school diploma. Like, what open-ended questions could we ask that would keep the participant in the decision-making role, allow them to talk freely, and get them to sell themselves on getting their GED? Because our goal is to keep them in that decision-making role. So got to give them space to tell the story. So rather than have you come up with those, I will show you what I came up with. But So if you want open-ended questions, like here's a set. If you did decide that you wanted to get your GED, how might that benefit you? Or how has not having your GED or diploma, how has that impacted you? Because remember, part of change can be what makes you miserable in your current comfort zone. And so then when I can reflect on what I don't like about being here, then I'm more likely or more interested in moving to the learning zone. What, if anything, scares you about studying for the GED? So don't want to ignore that. The what would have to happen to take that fear away? Talk to me about how many hours a week you have available to invest in getting your GED, and what changes would you need to make in your life to make this a reality? So again, instead of me as a case manager telling people you need to get your GED, how can I guide them in such a way with open-ended questions so that they can see the reason to acquire this? And so one other area I want to touch on is this whole idea of getting people to reveal challenges. So what I did was I tried to ask some open-ended questions that sound non-judgmental. And my purpose, again, avoid using the word barrier. We talked about this at the March 4th session. And so if it's okay with you, I'd like to talk to you about any life situations or challenges that you face that we might need to plan around. And so, a few of the questions that I might ask, and again, I can see this sort of in my own mind in an assessment interview. When you think about going to school or returning to work, what are the kinds of things that are going on in your life? I'd already shown you that we'd need to plan around. Or other than working with us, what other services or resources in the community have you accessed? How was that experience? What organizations have you found to be most helpful? So they might tell me they go to the food bank. They might tell me that they go to probation, parole, to community action, to voc rehab, all of these other services that, well, at least are currently out there, depending on what federal funding will be out there here in the near future. So, or can you tell me about legal issues that you've dealt with in the past that could be a consideration for moving forward? I do know that in many programs, they work with employers that do drug testing, especially like manufacturing. Oh, actually, farming does, coal mines. I'm trying to think of entire industries that do this. Oh, my brother's a truck driver. They get random drug tested all the time. So some of our employers and occupations require drug testing to be hired. So just make the statement. Some do hair samples and others do urine testing. Would that be something that we would need to consider as we plan for your future? Why or why not? So get them to talk about what's going on in terms of, and maybe they'd say, yeah, I think I don't want any employer that would require drug testing. And it's like, well, that gives me a piece of information. Or talk about a little bit about your general health and how health concerns could impact your ability to participate. So, what I'm trying to do is, again, is to just sound non-judgmental, purposely avoid using the word barrier, and like just consider how it would feel if I was on the other side of the desk, like if I were asked some of the questions that we sometimes ask in the way in which sometimes we ask them. So I'm thinking like, and I don't know, what comes from the state and what the LWIAs actually develop, but I really I'm thinking that and kind of recommend that the state, maybe working with LWIAs, could help create a guide with open-ended questions, like a desk guide, to help locals get practice asking questions in a variety of areas, on like job search, on work history, on career interest, what people might be interested in, and whether or not they want to get their GED, as I just showed you. I've written questions for people who English isn't their second language and they really need more English courses in order to be able to work. And so what kind of questions can I ask that help them to see how this would be advantageous? And then even revealing these challenges. I think it's, I guess, again, my experience is it's just really hard for people on the spot with somebody sitting there to come up with open-ended questions. And, maybe if we had some kind of desk guide or some kind of aid, that it would help retrain local staff how to implement this. I don't know. Is that a good idea? Is that workable, unworkable? What's your thought about that before, and then we're going to move to another subject. Is that the kind of technical assistance that the state would provide to locals, or are locals totally independent and can do everything how they want?
I think with the approach that we're going with, the more customer centered and how we're building our new management information system, it seems logical that could go right hand in hand, and having a helpful hand of open-ended questions could not hurt at all and help quite a bit, probably.
Okay. So that's what Jim does. Is everybody on board with that?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's just, it's a short, like it's a pamphlet or something and actually what happens is as people use it and they look down at the questions, it's like, oh my gosh, I like reading over and I see my participant doesn't speak English or doesn't have their GED or hasn't worked in a number of years, or maybe is on currently getting TANF or food stamps. That if I could have a series like 6 or 7 like this questions, it doesn't mean you ask them all in lockstep, but it just gives them something to start with. And I'm thinking it's just a little desk guide. And then after a while, what happens is that becomes internalized, it becomes ingrained, and they don't need the little desk guide anymore. New staff would, but the more seasoned staff, we're training them to become more open. Okay. So the next thing then that we want to, I'm going to move, is to giving affirmations. That's one of the other, the second skill. Sounds easy. Again, all of this sounds easy. It's a little bit more complicated than it first seems. But just to take you back to something that we looked at the last session, how to respond to change talk. So our goal is to evoke change talk or to just spontaneous hear people making change talk. So we evoke it by using these open-ended questions, and then the participant makes change talk and says, yeah, I really would like to get my GED, or maybe a local says, I really wish that we could be more customer oriented, because that's why I ever, took this job, is I thought I wanted to help people. When somebody makes change talk, one of your options, and we'll look at the second one a few slides from now, but the first one is that what you can do is you can use an affirmation. So they make the change talk. I'd like to get a job. A GED could help me. And as a coach, like, you need to know how to respond to that. And so we do the affirmation. What an affirmation is the act of just reflecting back positive feedback. It's, and I'll give you examples here in a second. They're based on strengths, behaviors, values, their effort that they've made. So they're always, affirmations obviously then are always positive. We're never talking about their deficiencies and things they do poorly or wrong. We're building on strength. So what affirmations do is build a person's self-esteem and confidence. And you might remember from the last session, we said, in order for somebody to want to make a change, they have to be ready, they have to be willing, and they have to be able. And able is, I have to believe that I can actually be successful. If I don't believe that I can be successful, then I'm not very likely to take the risk to do a thing. So affirmations help build that self-esteem and that confidence. It also, they give people space to see their own strengths and maybe shift away from everything that's going wrong in their life. And what it is, it's just a little micro skill, because it takes seconds to provide an affirmation. But what they do is it increases change talk and it decreases sustained talk that we talked about the last time. So what does it sound like? What it sounds like is just some examples would be, that sounds like you really have a good plan. Now, obviously, I can only say that if they just said something that does sound like a good plan. I mean, I don't want to lie. I don't want to give false affirmations. It has to be genuine, because otherwise you come off as kind of being fake if you don't believe it. But it sounds like you've really thought a lot about this and have some really good ideas about how you might move toward a more customer-driven system, or this would be more of a client one. It sounds like you're determined to do what's best for you and your children. That's a good suggestion that you have, or you've accomplished a lot in a really short time. So what affirmations do is reduce defensiveness and, again, facilitate change. And they show that you are on their side. So we want to use those. But some people confuse two things. They confuse praise and affirmations. And so I wanted to find the difference. It's subtle, but it's important. So the dictionary defines praise as it's an expression of approval. It's a compliment. It's, admiring someone for something. Praise is one directional, and oftentimes it's like a surface level judgment. When somebody compliments you, or they say something like, I think you're really smart, or I'm so proud of you, or wow, I really like your new haircut. They let you know how they feel about you. And so praise contains an explicit, or implicit I statement. It's a personal judgment. So for example, like I just said, I think you're really smart, or I'm so proud of you. Both of those reflect the giver or the speaker's standards. Like, you have to work to get my approval. And what's wrong with that is, in motivational interviewing, my approval or my disapproval is not essential to the participant, or to the customer. So what affirmations do is reflect positive feedback about a client's strengths. It's noticing and pointing out a strength that we see, or a specific behavior that will move them ahead. So again, the goal is to enhance their self-esteem, highlight their abilities. So it's there's a difference between, I'm going to show you actual examples, but there's a difference between like praise, compliments, and where you're acting as judge, and affirmation, where you're simply giving people feedback. So here's a parallel structure of praise, I'm proud of you. An affirmation parallel would sound like, congratulations, you've worked hard, you really deserve that job. Or, I think this resume is much improved, is praise. An affirmation is to say the time and energy that you put into updating your resume, it really shows. Or going further down, I couldn't be any happier to see these scores, like on a test or a GED or something. But parallel, you tried really hard on that. You must be really pleased with how well you did. So what difference do you notice in those two? Does anything just jump off the page between praise and affirmations?
The praises start with I's and the affirmation starts with the you.
Exactly. It's like you read my mind. There is no I in you. And it's retraining ourselves. And I'm telling you this, if you have kids, spouse, whatever, it's that if we practice everywhere, make you statements, you did a good job, you put the effort in and it shows, you really handled that situation well. If you can turn it into you, then I think that what we're really doing is help build that person's self-esteem, help them build their confidence in themselves because they see themselves in a new way. Now, what I want to do quickly is we're going to try an actual example. And I did make it a little bit complicated, but we have a participant, Rachel. She left high school in 11th grade, then went to work at the ABC plant nursery. She worked there 2 years. She got laid off. She knows she should get her GED, high school diploma, but she says she's tired of people telling her to get it. She knows that it will hold her back in jobs and life. But with all the other things happening in her life right now, she just doesn't have the time or energy to do it right now. Not getting it does make her feel inadequate and just a little bit guilty. So that's what we know about Rachel. What I want you to tell me is, what are Rachel's strengths and how can I turn those strengths, any one of her strengths, into an affirmation? So we have a challenging situation. How can we still be positive and give her positive feedback? Here, let's see here. Okay, what are Rachel's strengths? Name a strength that you see within that scenario. Start there.
She's a go-getter, not afraid to work.
Yeah, she's a go-getter. She's not afraid to work. And when she worked somewhere for 2 years. Like she has job retention kind of like under her belt. She has an awareness, I'm seeing in this. She has 2 years experience, has awareness of her need for more education. So it's not like somehow that's lost on her. She's willing to work. She knows what she needs to do. She also recognizes that right now, it's just not a good time. Remember, to make a change, the timing has to be right. You have to be ready, willing, and able. And if she's not ready, she shouldn't go start it and then like have it fail. So it's actually good awareness, as you guys are saying, that she knows what she needs to do, and she also knows this isn't the time. She has, Lori saying she has a work ethic, reliability, work ethic, and responsibility. Right. And so now what we do is we attempt to turn those into to affirmation. So I'll show you what I came up with. What are her strengths? She has long-term retention. You guys said that, worked 2 years. She's independent-minded. She doesn't like being told what to do. That's actually a good thing. I think sometimes we like it when people are compliant. I actually more like it when people are not compliant. Or, well, not that they like just break all the rules, but that they are independent thinkers. They're going to get further in life. She's aware of the challenge and her need to get her GED, which you guys said, and she understands that to be successful, she needs to get it, but she also knows the time is not right. So possible affirmation: you're somebody who was successful for 2 years in a job. You have what it takes to, maintain a job, or you have, over time, you have built a very solid work history. So again, you statements. You make your own decisions and you don't let others tell you what you should do, or you understand the importance of education and understand the sort of concentrated commitment it will take or you know that you have a lot on your plate right now, so the time isn't right, you're determined that when you do go for it, you want to do it right. So those are all positive, positive feedback or affirmations. So we want to, and when I go over this with the LWIAs, with the staff, we're going to go into this in more detail, because it's something that what I hear a lot of is, in listening to staff, a lot of praise, that's good. But what we want to do is we want to move it away from praise where they're dependent on our judgment, and move it toward affirmations. So our next skill is asking for permission. And I think this is the least used of all 5 skills. And it's the one, it's so simple to do, but for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe we've just never been instructed on it. But from time to time, I have information that I want to share with the person. Maybe, I have a recommendation or I have advice based on what the participant is saying. The issue is that we don't want to just start dispensing advice. You first have to ask permission. So when you ask permission, then you're keeping the person in control. So in implementing motivational interviewing, you can give information, you can give advice, but only if you ask for permission first. So only provide information or advice, or express a concern if, one, the participant asks you to do it, or if you ask whether or not it will be all right. And again, I'll show you specific examples. When you do ask permission to give advice, to give a recommendation, whatever, just recognize, and you'll see this, you want to be brief, you want to be relevant to whatever the situation, whatever the conversation had to do with, and you have to be focused. What does that mean? It means that you don't have free reign to go on and on as much as you like about the subject. You want to be brief and then get their initial reaction to the information that you provided, and find out, are they interested in more, or are they already showing signs of resistance to whatever information that you're providing? So if they show, third point, if they show resistance, arguing, interrupting, ignoring, denying, body language, cross their arms, that suggests that they are shutting down, eye rolling, crossing their arms, furrowing their brow, you have to stop. Because if you don't stop, then what you're doing is you're creating more resistance. And so if they don't want to hear it, then move on. So it basically, if I say, I have an idea, if you're interested in hearing it, and they say, no, I'm not, well, then that means no. And so I say no problem, and I move on with maybe asking another open-ended question, or, get back on track. So as coaches, what we want to do is always just remain respectful, reduce the chance of people becoming defensive, and like keep them in control. And so then what I want to do is I'm going to engage the participant in evaluating the information that I've provided. So, this might be where I ask them, so what do you think of that? Or does that sound like that would work, or that would be helpful? I mean, anybody who's tried to give a teenager or anyone advice on something, how they react to, well-meaning adults in their life, giving them suggestions on how they can and should change some of their behaviors. People are bombarded with endless advice, how to raise their children, how to go about job search, how to live their lives, how to pick a career, how to do things better. And the problem is they don't hear it when we're giving it to them, because now it's almost goes back to something I was talking about. It's uneven power. And so it seems like this person feels like they have more power over my life than I have. So if they're not buying it, you're just wasting your breath. But we can give it in careful, measured ways. So the way in which you do it in motivational interviewing is something, it's ask, offer, ask. The case manager or the career coach. I have an idea if you're open to hearing it. The participant says, or the other person, if it's not necessarily a participant, but the other staff person, if they're local, they say, yeah, go ahead. Now notice they've given you permission, so they're still in control. You share your information briefly in a concise way, and it's got to be relevant. And then you just ask, so what are your thoughts on this? And yeah, because we could think that what we've offered was a perfect fit, but they might not think so. So you always have to check and see, how did it land with them? We are not in control of other people's change. And by releasing the pressure to try to convince someone that they have to change, we're kind of allowing them to regain their sense of autonomy, and it helps them to explore their own reasons for change again. So here's like a little cheat sheet for asking permission to give someone advice or recommendation. So I might say, would it be all right if, or can I share a concern with you if you're open to that? I'm wondering if I could ask for just a couple minutes to provide you with some information that I think might be helpful to you. If you're okay with it, I'd like to share some resources that we have that have helped other participants I've worked with who are in similar situations, or I have an idea if you're open to hearing it. So the best tactic is simply to ask permission. And if, again, I mean, if it's imminent danger, like I don't say, can I, I'm asking permission to tell you that you're about to get hit by a truck. Like in that case, you wouldn't do it, of course, but those instances would be few and far between, and hopefully never. But that's how to ask. And so I've covered kind of the basics and of why you want to ask for permission. Again, it is the skill that is the least used of the 5. And so my question is, why is asking permission before dispensing advice? Why is it important? Why is it powerful? I've gone over some of it, but what are your thoughts? For me to see how I did explaining it.
They're more willing to hear it and potentially follow it.
Yep.
Gives them a sense of a buy-in, the person you're asking the question. And
Yeah.
maybe not look at you cross-eyed like, what's this person going to?
Yeah, or like it's almost, if you start telling me something and you didn't ask my permission, it's almost I feel like you're judging in a sense, or you're trying to control me, and it creates resistance even if I like the idea that you're providing. And Christopher saying it engages them through verbal approval. Exactly. And then as I put up here, it is a respectful way to share information with another person. And by the way, it's an interesting thing, and I've like kind of measured this, but personally, but also professionally. It is kind of interesting because whenever I'll ask permission, and I had to retrain myself how to do that. But it's like, I mean, if you're interested, I'll give you an idea. Or, with my nephew who's in college, it's like, I've gone through that. If hearing about my experience would be helpful, I'm willing to share. 99.9% of the time, the person says yes. They give you permission. It is a rare thing when somebody tells you no, but you've kept them in control. And Christy says, you're not preaching, you're simply sharing information. Exactly. And I love it. It signals respect. It allows them to stay in control. It builds trust, rapport, emphasizes their personal choice. They are still totally controlling. And once they gave you permission, they no longer are angry when you're giving them this information. So they're not going to be resistant to the information. So they're much more open. So that is the, that's one of our skills. Next one is reflective listening. And so we're going to leave asking permission. And there's so much you can talk about in terms of listening. I mean, you could do a year-long training on listening skills, but given our format, like I've got to hit highlights. So I'm just going to use examples that we can work through rather than kind of talking about it at the 30-foot level. But back to that slide in terms of motivational interviewing. So our goal is to evoke change talk. The client makes change talk. Then the way in which you respond to change talk, you make an affirmation, or you use active or reflective listening. So the change talk, here's my example. The person says, if I help my daughter now, she will be better at school as she grows, or as she ages, or as she grows up. Affirmation, you recognize that your influence can help your daughter. So that's an affirmation. It's, reflecting back, giving her positive feedback. Reflective listening, which is very similar, but is different, is so, because I'm trying to repeat back what I heard, is you want to do what you can for your daughter now to give her a firm foundation in the future. Like that's what I think I heard. So it's when you hear change talk, so it's important, I guess, to know these are the 5 skills, but I also have to know when to use them. So when I hear change talk, I do an affirmation or use active listening. So what is active listening? It's basically, it just is fully concentrating on what's being said rather than just passively hearing. I mean, there's a difference between hearing and listening. So the key to active listening is that I have to repeat or paraphrase what the speaker said. So this ensures that that what I hear is what the speaker said, because if I repeat it back and I got it wrong, they have this opportunity to correct me. So if I know that the next thing I have to do is paraphrase to make sure that I truly understand, then I'm much more likely to stay focused on what the speaker has said. I have to listen with full attention if I know I have to rephrase it or paraphrase it or parrot it back. So because oftentimes you think you heard, but unless you double check, you really can't be sure. I've had conversations with people where we're having 2 entirely different conversations, and I was unaware of it because neither one of us is checking what the other person is saying. And where I think we really use this skill, and we know it inside out, is when somebody gives you directions. You repeat them back to make sure you understand, because communication is so inexact. You're like, okay, so I go down here, I go, for a mile, and then I'm going to turn right. Like you'll repeat it all back to make sure you got it. And that basically is reflective or active listening, because you're seeking to understand, to like really capture the essence of their message. And if you take the time to listen, then they will tell you what worked, what didn't, what they want to do in terms of making a change, what could be better. And it's, this is a skill that I think that is people, when they are first learning to do this, they're first practicing it, it feels phony because I think, like I was thinking about it in school, like we learn writing, we learn reading, we learn communication skills, but like in high school, in elementary school, grades, in junior high, I can't ever remember having any kind of class on listening. I did in college, but that was only because I was a psychology undergraduate. Graduate school, computer science, business administration, information resources, 0 on listening. And yet what they were training us to do was kind of be consultants in the computer field, and 0. So listening is it's just a totally underrated skill. But when somebody, a friend, a family member, I've got a therapist, a coach, whatever, who takes the time to listen, it's just so important, because the common reactions to being listened to is feeling understood, making me want to talk more, makes me like the person when somebody listens. It makes you feel respected, makes you want to come back. I think that when we use active listening, we're more likely, or any of the motivational skills, or all 5 of them, to get people that we have less re-engagement issues, where we're trying to re-engage people that we've lost. But what I see is that nothing hurts more than the sense that someone isn't listening to what we're saying. People complain about it all the time. Parents complain their children don't listen. Children complain their parents don't listen. Supervisors complain the workers don't listen. Workers complain the supervisors don't listen. Like, even friends, among like some of your most reliable sources, often are just too busy to listen. And so then you feel rejected. I think, imagine coming home from work or a conference, and you're excited to share what happened, and you're telling your partner how it went, and he falls asleep while you're talking. It hurts. You feel betrayed, and then you're a whole lot less likely to share other things. So people want to be understood, and that's why I think it's so powerful, because it means that you're being taken seriously. So let's look at one example. And again, local staff will get a lot more. So let's examine a few statements. Let's say that a customer says, "I'm really uncertain about anyone other than myself or my family watching my children." And that, by the way, is very common. That's why I use it as an example. And the coach says one of these 5 things. Have you never allowed anyone else to care for your children at all? B, by doing so, you might be preventing your children from experiencing the advantages of interacting with their peers. Or research shows that children who attend Head Start programs tend to be better adjusted when they enter school. It's really worth considering. Or, I enrolled my kids in daycare and they adapted well. And E, it seems like the idea of entrusting your children to someone unfamiliar makes you uneasy. So of those 5, which is the reflective listening response? A, B, C, D, or E? And everybody gets it. E, of course. What I want to show you is what's wrong with each one of those others. So A, have you never allowed anyone else to care for your children at all? Notice, it is challenging. It implies that the person is not being truthful. And so it's actually, again, is causing a break in the relationship, resistance. B, by doing so, you might be preventing your children from experiencing the advantages of interacting with their peers. Totally judgmental. You're judging me. Now, again, resistance. Research indicates that this is a good thing, that takes charge. I enrolled my children in daycare and they adapted well. I want you to know that's diverting the subject. Your parents did that, like when you were young, and you would say something like, "Oh, I stood at the school bus stop and it was cold, blah, blah, blah." And they're like, "When I was your age, I had to walk to school and I didn't even have, like shoes on my feet, and I had to walk uphill both ways." Like all of that. Notice we're no longer talking about you and your struggles. We're talking about them. It's diverting the conversation. And it seems like the whole idea of entrusting your children makes you uneasy. That is reflective, and that we can then build on and see whether or not we can get them to think about it differently. So again, cheat sheet. So you feel, it sounds like you're wondering. So what I hear you saying is, from your point of view, or so you're wondering if blah, blah, blah. So let's so that's a little cheat sheet. We're going to work through one example. And that one example is that the client says, "I think about going to school and getting some skills, but I really need to get a job right away. I know unless I get some skills, I won't get a job that I really like and will pay me well. How can I paraphrase that? And use my reflective listening." Give you a moment. So it sounds like you feel that the priority at this time is getting a job. Yeah, exactly. It's certainly what I'm hearing. Or it sounds like you think that gaining some skills, you think about gaining some skills, but you really need a job right now. Or so what I'm hearing is that you want to gain skills, get a better job, but that you can't afford to quit working right now. Excellent. That is like you are repeating back what you think you heard. My example is as you see it, getting a job is your highest priority right now. Yet in the back of your mind, you wonder if learning some skills might help you get a higher paying job that you would like better. That's what I heard. And all of us could hear something different. And the beauty of it is when I repeat it back or when I repeat what I think I heard, then the participant, the person that we're having this conversation with has an opportunity to correct us if we got it wrong, or to go, yeah, exactly right, and continue on. So so that is the fourth skill. Our fifth skill, because I also see what time it is summarizing. And it's basically we're going to summarize to emphasize change talk where we can. So if we circle back to something that I said repeatedly in the first session, and I've said it a few times here because it's so important, is we want to increase the frequency of change talk and the frequency that the participant hears themselves making change talk. So if a participant makes change talk, and then that means that they've heard themselves once. And then if I use reflective listening to repeat back what they've said, now they've heard it twice, and they have an opportunity to go on, because if I say, so what I'm hearing is that, a priority for you right now is getting a job, but in the back of your mind, you're thinking, oh, I'd really like to get some skill training. And then they talk more about that. Now it's almost like a third time right there. So they said it, I repeated it. And now if I include that change talk in my summary, now they've heard it a third, if not a fourth time. And that's part of our goal, is to increase that change talk. So basically, any discussion that we have with any person is going to cover a lot of territory. So what we want to do is we want to summarize the highlights of areas of agreement or disagreement. So summaries are really just a form of reflective listening. So it's not really a new skill as much as it's just a different use of a skill that we're already mastering. And summaries don't necessarily have to come at the end of the conversation. They can be used throughout the discussion to recap a specific topic that we're done with and then move on. So when you do a summary, the beauty of it is you get to decide what to include and what to exclude. And I exclude a lot of sustained talk and include a lot of change talk. You get to decide how to present the information. So I'm going to use anything that's going to help the person move forward, because, again, I get to pick it. And so they get to hear it over and over and over again. And it also shows that you actually really listen. So let me show you the format for it, or the little cheat sheet. Let's make a check sheet of where we are right now, or a checklist of where we are. Let's review what we've talked about. So I always announce that I'm about to do a summary. We're about to finish here, and I want to make sure that I understand everything correctly. And so it might be like you want a job in the medical field, but right now you're really feeling like you need to work. And so you don't have time to go to school. And so I just repeat the things that I've heard, but it's something that you want to plan on for the future. So let's review. This might be a good time to review what we've discussed. What I'm hearing is that these are the things that are important to you. Our time's running out, and I'd like to pull together what we've said up to this point. If I miss anything, let me know. So you basically, here's the format: announce that you're about to summarize. So include both sides. If there's any ambivalence still about change, you're not sure you want to be here today, but you came because your mother insisted on it, like hear it. Summarize any change talk that you've heard. And then fourth is invite the person to correct anything that you might have missed. So what did I miss? Did I miss anything? So one other, so anyway, that's the format. Here's what it might sound like. Let me stop and summarize what we've just talked about. You're not sure you want to leave, or you're not sure you want to leave construction because it's all you know, but at the same time, it's backbreaking and dangerous, and you're not making enough money because the weather impacts when you can work, so there's too much downtime. You said you wanted more information about good paying jobs in Peoria, and I said I would work with you to help you find the right field. Then you would like to learn more about short-term training programs that could build on your current skills. And you said this is a high priority, so you want to move quickly. Did I miss anything? So I included change talk, and I've invited them to correct anything that I heard incorrectly. So basically, and I know that that was fast, but those are our 5 skills that then I think fit hand in glove with not only the philosophy and the spirit that we talked about last time, but also in that whole customer journey mapping is looking everything from the client's perspective. So quickly, and then I'll see if there are any questions. Here's like, to me, the highlights of what we've talked about. I mean, everybody enters the program at different stages of readiness to change. Some people, it's not important to them yet. They've been sent by somebody else. For other people, it could be that they're already in the midst of making the change. They've already applied to schools or applying for jobs. They just want a little bit of help. So everybody enters the program in a different place. One of the things that I am going to talk to the local staff about much more thoroughly is what is the strategy, specific strategy that you use depending on where people come in that change paradigm. Some people have, it's pre-contemplation, haven't really thought about it. Some people have thought about it, but haven't decided. Other people are preparing. Some people are already doing the thing, they're in action, and other people in maintenance. And there are different motivational interviewing strategies that you use depending on where people are. The style of the coach matters. You'll remember that we talked about last time that if people are use motivational interviewing, you get like clients who are more participants are much more motivated, much more engaged, much more likely to continue coming back than when you have somebody who's paternalistic or more more dictatorial and tell people how to live their lives. That gets resistance and it gets people to drop. We're always listening for change talk, and that's something that you just have to train your ear to hear. You respond with change talk with reflective listening and affirmations, as I've shown you. Ask lots of open-ended questions, rely more on open-ended than closed. Summarize during natural lulls in the conversation. Watch for resistance. When you start seeing resistance, eye rolls, like people crossing their arms, leaning back, all of those, I mean, it can be behavioral. It can also be verbal, where they just change the subject or they argue with you. Slow down, step back. Because again, that person is in control. Always ask permission before dispensing advice. And it's so easy because you just have to say, it's so quick. It takes like 3 seconds is to say, I have some ideas if you want to hear them. Let them always suggest the next step. So what step are you ready to make? Where do you see yourself moving? And always emphasize the autonomy of the participants because decision making is always there. So I know we have about 4 minutes. I will answer any questions, comments, thoughts, hopes, fears, dreams. Thank you so much. Yay. It's great. So I'll give Shannon and Christy that $5 I promised them at the last session.
And just as we're kind of closing out, I just wanted to let everyone know that Shannon is putting all of the resources from these trainings specifically for OET. So the in-person training that we had back on the 4th, March 4th, we had a PowerPoint and then a persona worksheet that Jody gave us access to. So Shannon's put that on your OET teams, or she's going to if she hasn't yet. Shannon, I don't know if you want to let everyone know like what folder that's in. But then also the PowerPoint from last webinar 2 weeks ago, and then any information that Jody provides us today, I'll send that to Shannon to put in the teams as well for you all, your internal OET teams. And then I also sent Shannon the recording from the first webinar, and then I'll send her the recording from this one as well, just so you have that one-stop shop for your internal OET staff to access all the documents from this training.
There
Okay.
it is, right in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you, Shannon.
JSK, that actually is so funny. That's what my family calls me. They don't call me Jody, they call me JSK. It's my little nickname. I also, I don't know, because I don't know if I did it with this group. I sent remember the local staff, they all got a homework exercise last time. And I don't know if I sent it to you guys, and I don't know if you even would be interested in it. But I'm doing a homework exercise after each webinar for them, so that makes them reflect on the skills. I could include that, and you can do it if you want, or not. I don't, I mean, it's on a Google document, so I'll get notification that you sent it, but I really was not looking at, like, I look at generally, how generally as a group did people do. I'm not looking at specific individuals just to see if like I messed up talking about something and everybody's getting it wrong. So I'll send the link out for that through email. Yeah, great. Okay. All righty. Well then, I guess I have the local at 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock your time, 2 o'clock mine. And I guess this is it. So
Thank you.
now time would say goodbye to all of our family. All right, I am going to.
I'll go ahead and close this out. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks,
Yay.
Jody.
Thank you.